This is the Today with Tally podcast. And folks, we have a very special guest joining us on today's program. Berney Flowers is a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Air Force. He would go on then and would serve some time in the Pentagon, working within the DOD ranks. He was the actual senior advisor to Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. So we're going to talk about what he experienced when he was serving under the Biden administration, about everything that happened on the southern border. And with that, we're honored to be joined by retired Lieutenant Colonel Berney Flowers. How are you, sir?
It's good to see you, man. I mean, we talk all the time, but we don't get a chance to get on the air together. So I'm always pleased to get a chance to talk to you and see your perspective on things.
Today's about you. Today, we're going to be getting, look, there's so many American people out there that have never had simple questions answered without deflection gate everywhere they look. And this is why, look, President Trump was elected to lead this great country, because everybody got beyond tired, beyond fed up. A lot of folks want to know what happened, behind a lot of these closed doors, behind these veils that the American people just couldn't understand. We were scratching our heads. The right was saying we're being invaded by, 20 million illegal aliens, while the left is saying, no, there's nobody coming across our southern border. And then we've got video evidence of illegal criminal aliens coming across our border. And the left is saying, no, you're not seeing that. And then we have Aurora happen. You have Trinidad Aragua going up and down ladder wells with AR-15s, pistols, and, carrying out a transnational criminal organization right here in the United States of America. And the sitting member of Congress in that district, Jason Crow, says this is not happening in Colorado. Like, the gaslighting was insane. We know what happened. We've seen it. We've had boots on the ground. It has been proven that everything that happened, that we said happened, has happened. Again, it's been all on the record. It's been all on video. It's been out for everybody to see. So I want to know, when you were serving under DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas from the Pentagon, what were your daily briefings like?
It's funny you say that, and I'll just tell you what's up. I mean, I'd get in there in the morning, and there was a daily brief telling us what was going on in the nation. I was NORAD and U.S. Northcom's guy at DHS. So I'm the senior advisor. I'm the senior DOD guy there. My parent command is NORAD and U.S. Northcom. So as you remember, we're responsible all for the defense of the homeland. So that's why they pair us all up together. So I'm that guy over there sitting on Mayorkas' staff at the big boy table, and we're getting a brief on what's going on, what threats we're facing, that sort of thing. So I got to see things at a very, very high level. And let me tell you, it just didn't make a lot of sense to what the administration was doing, because, Mayorkas was getting his marching orders directly from Biden. And a lot of times he would just disappear and have to go over there. Same thing with, the vice president, same thing. I mean, he's a cabinet officer. So he'd come back and tell us, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. As a civil servant, I wasn't in a position to chastise him or go back on what he said. I just had to take it until I decided that I couldn't take anymore, and then I left. I hope I answered your question, but carry on. We're early in the game here.
No, I mean, there's so many folks out there that, again, have never had any of these questions answered about how the DHS secretary could allow 20 million unchecked, unvetted, illegal aliens into our country across the southern border with no pushback. And even though that there was impeachment papers drawn up, we still could not impeach a man that was heading up an agency that put America last. And this is why, again, I believe President Trump was overwhelmingly elected because of the dereliction of duty and the inaction of the Biden administration. And you had a front row seat to
I sure
exactly
did.
what was going on. Now, what were the actual priorities of Secretary Mayorkas when it
Well,
came?
you talk about voting, and it's very important for Americans to vote. It's hugely important because you got to remember most of the time that Biden was in office, he had a majority in Congress. And when he didn't have a majority, he had the ability to squash anything that the Republicans were trying to do. So his words were law. And there was just an overwhelming group of, senior people on the Democrat side that said, lip service to the people. They had the media. Remember, there's about 6 companies that own all the media in the United States, and they're owned by oligarchs, billionaires. They were all seemed to be in collusion. Remember, COVID was going on at the very same time. So we're being gaslit. And if you were sitting where I was, you would think, okay, these people are the most duplicitous people in the entire world because they're telling you that they're protecting the border, but yet I could see that the borders were open. The Border Patrol agents, Customs and Border Patrol, these people were being nullified. They weren't able to do their jobs. And a lot of the rank and file folks down in Texas, they wanted to do a good job, but they were being hamstrung officially by the Biden administration and by Mayorkas. It was almost like they were operating on 2 sets of rules, and I'm caught in the middle. I'm doing everything I can. But remember also, during this time, DHS was operating at about 80% working from home. So the corridors of DHS headquarters where I was working were pretty much empty. Think about it. So we had to call in, a lot of military people just to fill out the ranks to get things done. And so you got COVID going on. You've got this Afghan retrograde going on, which we haven't even gotten into yet. We're spending money left and right. And I just really believed that they were intentionally trying to bankrupt the entire United States of America to build as many bills and as possible. And then most of the money was going to these non-governmental organizations. And I will tell you that the Biden administration was advertising down in South America, saying basically to the effect, hey, Joe Biden's in office. The borders are open. Come, we will help you. I will tell you that if you look at some of those pictures from back in those days, you'd see people in these long caravans. But if you look at their feet, they were wearing sandals. Now, you're going to walk from Nicaragua across Mexico, the rough terrain out there in sandals. That didn't make any sense at all. So a lot of what I'm trying to say is a lot of stuff was staged. And I had to keep my mouth closed about it because, as a civil servant, I was sworn to carry out the will of the officers appointed over me. And the thing that broke me was, okay, the jab. I just was not going to, I fought it as long as I could. I would do whatever I could during the day to carry out the will of the officers appointed over me against my will, by the way. But at the end of the day, my parent command was telling me, okay, you've done all this stuff and now you need to take the jab. And that was the last straw. I'm not going to take this, what I consider to be gene therapy. So, I may sound emotional about this, but I am, because it was to me a slow coup. It was an organized coup against the American people. And thank God that we woke up and voted to put Mr. Trump in office, because the issue today, I have no idea how bad things would be if the vice president, Miss Harris, had been elected. It was just terrible. And these people were asking career civil servants and military people to do things that were against their credo. And it was just terrible.
And we're being joined by Berney Flowers, the former senior advisor to DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Now, Berney, look, did the United States of America under the administration that you were serving for, sponsor transnational criminal organizations and aid them, bringing them across the border knowingly that they were smuggling children, illegal aliens, drugs, weapons, and everything else that you could think of across that southern border coming into the United States of America?
Sponsor is a strong word. What I saw is that we were giving huge amounts of money to non-governmental organizations that were making things very easy for trafficking to happen. They basically hamstrung the officials down on the border and basically told them, get out of the way, help these people with health and welfare. But as far as actually patrolling the border, no. And I just saw a lot of patterns because being a senior person there, I got a chance to see the budget. And what I was seeing was money being spent on things that you wouldn't be happy with. And another thing that blew me away was they were concentrating where these people landed into blue areas. For example, remember a few years ago when, or better yet, a few months ago during the campaign, and they were talking about Springfield, Ohio, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. Well, that's a pretty red area. But if you concentrating a bunch of Democratic leaning people in that area, you would very easily flip the congressional district. And, you know, people don't understand that congressional districts are mandated, or better yet, are counted by how many people who actually live there, whether they're citizens or not. So the congressional district would get more money per person based on the occupancy there, as opposed to just voters. So the idea is to flood the place with Democrat-leaning people. That was the plan. Turn Ohio, red places, into California. And as a civil servant, I couldn't do anything about it. I just had to carry out the wishes of the government until I decided that I had to quit. And so it just got to be too much for me, between that, between the jab, between the Afghan retrograde, just the day-to-day chaos. I mean, the fact that so many people were not necessarily working every day, and there was just a lot of craziness going on, and I just couldn't stand it anymore. But again, altogether, between my military time and my government time, I had 34 years in the system. Luckily, I was able to retire again. And as you know, I ran for Congress because I was so fed up with the system, and I tried and did my absolute best to try to make things change. But let me tell you, I didn't understand. Well, maybe I did. I did understand what Mayorkas and his crew were doing, and I was totally against it. But I felt that I would stay as long as I could and try to have as much effect as I possibly could, and try to protect the American people as much as I possibly could. And I did that.
Let me tell you about Patriot Homes right here in the greater Houston metropolitan area, folks. These guys are out doing the hard work. It's kind of hard to please people in today's world, but let me tell you, Cody Dawson and his family business stand behind everything they do.
Custom kitchens, bathrooms, master bathrooms, whole home renovations, outdoor patios, home additions, outdoor kitchens.
They are your one-stop shop for everything that you want to do in your home. It's always nice to know that you got somebody that can come in and give you a great price. Not only give you a great price, but be on time, on budget, reliable. All you got to do is just go to patriothomestx.com. That's patriothomestx.com. They're building your vision with pride and precision. That had to have been some of the most difficult times of your life, living through this
Gut-wrenching
regime with zero morale. You didn't probably even want to even get dressed to go to work because of the treasonous activity that you saw that was going on at the highest levels of our country. And like you were saying, I was saying, the sponsorship, did the United States sponsor this? Well, I believe the answer is the Biden administration was funding the NGOs. Now,
yes,
in turn, the NGOs were aiding the movement of the trafficking and the drugs and the transnational criminal organizations that were coming across the border unchecked and unvetted.
Yes.
So the NGOs here played a monumental role in the destruction of the United States of America over a 4-year period that literally put our nation on its knees. And we're still recovering from that today. And, you know, that leads me to Colorado Springs on Saturday. And I know you have some affiliation to Colorado Springs. That's where Northcom is. You got Peterson Air Force Base, you got Schriever, you got Northcom, you got Fort Carson,
Cheyenne Mountain.
Yeah. And you also have NORAD, and you
Yep.
also have large amounts of transnational criminal organizations that are running rampant in Colorado. And this is where the Tren de Aragua first reared their ugly heads, you know, in the apartment complex there in Aurora, where you had the former head of ICE in Denver, John Fabricatore, go in there and was literally saving American citizens from this apartment complex that Tren de Aragua completely took it over.
Yep.
Well, now, one of the raids that happened not long ago was leaked. And so the federal government, DHS, ICE, and along with 8 other federal agencies were not able to carry out this mission as successfully as planned. But Saturday night, Colorado Springs, they took down over 114 criminal illegal aliens that were operating in Colorado Springs. And it was a 10 agencies were all working in unison, and they had 300 agents on the ground there. And you know, I mean, it's basically for every single criminal illegal alien there, they had their own personal agent to literally walk them to the paddy wagon to get processed for deportation and or being seen by a judge or having criminal charges brought up against them, to even stay here in the United States, to go through the court system, perhaps even get locked up here in the United States without going directly down to El Salvador. What did you think when you saw that massive operation play out in Colorado Springs on Saturday night?
I say 3 cheers. I was clapping. I read about it, and I had some calls from old buddies of mine. I was stationed out there for 3 years, and when I was working for Northcom, I just had a lot of ties. I had to go out there every 45 days for various regions for about 10 years. So with that said, very, very, very outstanding operation. I know that the Biden administration had been told about this club where these people gathered, and they did that routinely all throughout the Biden administration, and nothing was done. So these people had gotten arrogant, and now that the Trump administration has gathered their resources and put all this together, I'd say 3 cheers. It's wonderful to see, and I want to see a whole lot more of that, because remember, they say there's 11 million illegals here in this country. My guess, this is just Bernie's guess, I think the number is more like 20. So it's going to take nonstop rage to get this done, even past Trump's presidency. This is something that was done by I believe, the oligarchs to destabilize our country and basically turn us into a fiefdom. And I have my thoughts about such things, but if you notice that when Obama came in, the middle class was very powerful. And when Obama left, the middle class was reduced significantly. And it's the middle class that makes this country run. So mom and pop, regular people working the day, paying the taxes, that sort of thing. These people were here to replace us. And so I'm so thankful, again, that these sorts of raids were happening. Folks, if they want to come here and become American citizens and be loyal to this country, that's a wonderful thing. But if you want to come here and you don't want to be loyal to our country, then you should go somewhere else.
Agreed. Now, how difficult was it sitting in on these briefings every single day, being an advisor to the former DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, knowing that, is this guy here deliberately and intentionally harming the nation that I'm supposed to be protecting right now, again, with no pushback, and to say everything was fine when it was not okay? Half the media stations were saying there's nothing going on the southern border, everything is fine, go about your your day of business. And then the other half of the media stations in this country were like, we got 15,000 illegal aliens pouring across our southern border every single day with nothing being done. The floodgates have opened. And I'm here in Texas, and I saw it firsthand. And so that's when Governor Abbott got involved, and he started Operation Lone Star, which did help a lot, but it still only just funneled everybody into one specific location and not just the whole entire Rio Grande River. So, I mean, again, how could you sit into these briefings knowing that the deliberate actions of your boss were to harm the United States of America?
Frustrating is a word that is not adequate. It's the one that pops into my head right now. But you took the same oath that I did, and the oath does not go away after you retire or leave the military. And so we're here trying to protect and defend our country. But the issue of the day is I was just seeing things that just did not make sense. And I'm seeing these briefings every day. I'm seeing, literally the chief of the Coast Guard do things that I didn't agree with. I mean, I'm sitting here with these very, very senior officials. I'm seeing, the chief of Customs and Border Patrol. I mean, all these people reported to, Mr. Mayorkas and his deputy and the chief of staff. And, I got a chance to sit in on a lot of that stuff. And it just, okay, here's a pattern here. Am I going crazy? Because this seems to be that they are literally trying to destabilize our country. And, folks out in the field are fighting as hard as they could, but their weapons, their budgets, their abilities, they weren't being backed by the leadership. And an organization is only as good as its leader. So again, I could see media organizations being marched in every day. There seemed to be somewhat of a bias, but I had to keep my mouth closed because, again, I was doing a job. And if I quit at that time, okay, there would be just one less set of eyes that would be working for the American people. So I just stood it as long as I could, but it was very frustrating. It made me very, very angry. And as a matter of fact, I could tell you some other things, but remember when the Afghan retrograde happened, and I remember sitting in the command post at DHS headquarters. I'm down in the basement in places where most people can't go. And I'm watching this closed circuit TV live happen. And I had been in Afghanistan. I had been at that airport where all this went down. And it just really, really gave me a very, very negative feeling. I kept my feelings to myself, but it was very, very, very frustrating. And that's when I realized that I got to get out of here for my own sanity. But it was driving me nuts. And anybody who's ever been in the military and took it seriously, it would have driven you nuts, it would have driven you crazy too. And so I did the best I could. I protected the people. I tried to keep the faith, but I'm just thankful for the Trump administration because they're turning this whole thing around. But as I said before, an organization is only as good as its leader. And I just don't think that the Mayorkas group was as interested in protecting the American people as the rest of us were.
Did the secretary ever really truly believe the words that were coming out of his mouth in these briefings?
I can't really say that I can't put words in his mouth, but his actions told me that he was working for a different agenda than I was. I can definitely say that. I mean, I saw some things, guys who had been in senior levels for a very, very long time, working in, Customs, Border Patrol. I'm working right beside these people, and they just didn't understand either. But the truth is, we were all, what we call patriots. So there wasn't a lot of talk in the initial beginning of, we don't trust this guy. We were just carrying out. We figured that, okay, the boss knows what he's doing. We're going to carry this out and do what we're told. And then there was just goo gobs of money being spent. And when I say goo gobs, I mean billions of dollars being wasted and spent on things that I just didn't agree with. But, as a civil servant, my job was to execute. That's why they call it the executive branch. So I was not in a position to question. And you really can't come home and talk to your wife or your good friends about that because a lot of that stuff was deemed classified. And that's another problem. A lot of things are overclassified. So the scrutiny that you would ordinarily get if you were in a regular agency or not working in their headquarters, there just wasn't enough scrutiny. So there were just a lot of things that went wrong, and I would love to get a chance to try to go back and fix it. But that's another theory for another time.
Hmm. So I know that impeachment papers came down late in the 4 year Biden administration when it came to Alejandro Mayorkas, and that became big news. But at that point, the damage had already been done. What was the chatter going on inside these briefings, knowing that your boss could be impeached?
He kind of laughed it off. He didn't even take it seriously because we got to remember votes counts. So at that time, you got to remember that the Congress was run by the Democrats. You had Nancy Pelosi, the lead for the congressional Democrats. So he was protected. He knew that there was literally nothing the Republicans can do. And if anybody takes this, don't take this with a grain of salt. Your vote counts because your representative makes a big difference in how the government goes. So the issue of the day is he knew he was protected by Joe Biden and a Democratic Congress. So he just kind of, kept on with what he was doing. And the only thing I believe that saved this country was that Trump didn't back down. He kept on doing what he was doing and eventually got elected. And now you see the result. We've got to turn the entire government around. People are thinking that, oh, okay, now Trump's in office and our problems are over. No, 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 no. The entire direction of the government has to change. And you've got a lot of people that were brought in by the Obama administration that are now in senior positions and, just waiting for an opportunity to cause problems. They see things a lot differently. It's not black and white. It was just a matter of, when he was in power, Mayorkas knew that he was protected. So he was able to do whatever he wanted to do on behalf of the Democrats, behalf of the Bidens, and I think behalf of the World Economic Forum. But that's a whole nother show.
Yeah, look, it's been 21 years when those, Obama folks came in as low-level folks in his administration that are now 21 years into the job, or even 25 or 30. I mean, they could have, been, hired at the, 5, year 6 to fill some of these roles at a low level, and they've worked their way up that food chain.
Yep.
And look, let's face it, for 12 out of 16 years, we have had Obama and Biden, which is basically the same subset, 12 out of 16 years in this country for that damage to happen. And it certainly did. Damage and it's not even, I mean, we're talking, Richter scale, earthquake of 16 plus destruction. At least that's my opinion on what I see. That
we have the same opinion.
Yeah. And we know that there's at least 20 million illegal aliens in this country that I believe, through my sources and assets on the ground and everything else. You believe that there's perhaps 20 million illegal aliens in this country as well. What sort of danger is the United States in any imminent danger right now when it comes to terrorist organizations and sleeper cells that are operating in the United States of America due to the gross negligence of our southern border being wide open, as free to move about the country, just coming in through the turnstiles?
Personally, I believe national security is job one. And if I was an adversary trying to take down a nation, you had a lot of military-aged men coming across that border, and these people knew how to use weapons. They knew how to handle austerity. The issue of the day is, a small cadre of well-placed soldiers can create chaos in a place that has become as comfortable as we have in the United States. So yes, you can't sit back here and allow these people to come into the United States and make themselves at home when they have no allegiance to our country. And a lot of them hate our country. And am I saying that our country is perfect? Yeah, we've done a lot of things that, I'm not necessarily proud of, but in all, essence, we've done more good than harm across the world. If you notice, whenever there's a disaster or something like that, it's America that's being expected to go across the world to, protect people from a tsunami or defend people against this, that, and the other. So yes, to answer your question, a lot of people come across that border. We got national security as a major problem because, again, not only that, one of, the national security thing, imagine this scenario, bear me out. Okay. You got this, what's his name? Chris Van Hollen, senator from Maryland, running down to El Salvador to protect a non-American citizen, this fellow who is not an American citizen, but they're making a big deal of it. The cults, the cartels have huge amounts of money. Imagine if the cartels were funding the Democrat Party. Imagine if the cartels were funding Chris Van Hollen. The only thing I can think of as to why he would be so interested in putting all his resources into going down to El Salvador to protect someone who's not an American citizen. If you remember back not long ago when the hurricane hit Western North Carolina, where were all these Democrats? Where were they? Weren't they supposed to be over in Western North Carolina helping their fellow Americans? Or when it hit down in Florida? No. They seem to not care, but they seem to care about this person who is not an American citizen. So my thoughts, I'm just guessing, maybe that Tren de Agua is funding some of their activities in the Democrat. I wonder where the Democrats get all their money from. That's an odd thing to me. And so, like I said, I got a lot of theories about this thing, but again, letting people into your country who are not interested in protecting and defending your country, you're just putting yourself at risk. It's a foolhardy thing to do. And I say, let's get these people out of here as fast as possible. America for Americans. America first.
Yes, sir. And I do sincerely believe that Representative Jason Crow out of Colorado is being fully funded by Tren de Agua and MS-13, as that was ground zero, really, for this operation rearing its ugly head when it did in Colorado. And Jason Crow, he came out and said, there's none of this going on in my district. They went after the former head of ICE in Denver and called him nuts and said that he was lying about everything that was going on in Colorado. He had been screaming this from the rooftops well before they caught it all on video. And if it wasn't for Cindy Romero in that apartment complex, when that apartment was being taken over by transnational criminal organizations, nobody would have ever believed what was going on in Colorado. And when you want to talk about a third world type environment, it was very bad. From anything and everything that you can think of that was bad, that was all going in. That was all taking place there in that apartment complex for blocks and blocks. I mean, they literally took it over. Cops weren't even going in there because they knew it was an extremely dangerous situation. And then when you have the sitting member of Congress there ignoring it, they're not going to have a leg to stand on if they go in there and they try to invoke anything, because they knew that they didn't have the backs of the federal government. So a lot of these people that were just pure patriots were going in there to save the residents.
Yeah.
To save the people of our country, because the folks that have sworn to protect those people laid down and they allowed the bad to take over the good. And again, it still makes no sense to me, but you still have so many Americans in this country that are not standing with America. Their allegiance is not to America, and they prove it every day when they're waving every flag except for the United States of America flag. And that right there is extremely disheartening to me, especially when it comes to the patriotism of this country. You said when we get all of these illegal aliens that are pouring across the country that have zero allegiance to the United States of America, and then they start to have influence, that's how you take a country out from within. And that's all we need, right? Is for all these youngsters and very, extremely vulnerable citizens of this country to automatically start believing the propaganda and rhetoric that's coming in from a very bad opposition, to say, hey, look, you are bad, and this is why you're bad, and this is why you need to to be on our team. And so therefore, every single day, our allegiance is sinking lower and lower in this country. And that is a problem.
Absolutely ridiculous. And if I can take you back to something you said earlier, you were mentioning about these MS-13 gang members that took over in Colorado. Well, think about this. Who was arranging for those people to have a place to live when they arrived at their final destination in Colorado? These non-governmental organizations. And a lot of them, believe it or not, were working under various churches. You know, I don't want to point anybody out, but every church was kind of not necessarily involved, but they use a lot of front organizations. So the government would give money to these NGOs. They would attach their name to some church. Next thing you know, somebody's writing checks to some apartment complex and some food delivery service. And now this guy who doesn't speak English from Venezuela is parked in an apartment with weapons and access to whatever he wants. Some of them even had cars, that sort of thing. And gradually this was going on and pushing out American citizens, and DHS was doing nothing about it. That's what I had a problem. And the thing is, I saw these briefings, but I couldn't say or doing anything about it without being immediately terminated. So eventually, like I said, I left on my own recognizance. I couldn't stand it anymore, but that's basically how it was working. And we got a lot of things going on because in a lot of places we've been simply infiltrated.
This is the Today with Tally podcast.